This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. My name is Neil Sarvanamutu. Today is Tuesday, the 29th of April. And we are here the day after the federal election, and we are to talk about the implications of that election on the City of Ottawa. With me, I have John Willing. Welcome, John.
Hello, Neil.
And we have the return of Joanne Chianello. Welcome back, Joanne.
I miss you guys so much.
So did we.
Well, we did too. So you've been away for about a month. You've been off on holiday?
Oh, yeah, just relaxing. So, it's no coincidence that my time away has coincided with the federal election. I decided to help out the Carney campaign. So I was working at Liberal headquarters, doing some research, media monitoring, this and that. I don't want to overstate my role. Very low level cog. But, I just decided, the country was at a big moment. I thought, I left journalism 2 years ago. Of course, you'd never be able to be involved in politics in that way. But I thought, why did I leave to sit on the sidelines? And so my main goal was I will not be living in a country where Pierre Poilievre is the prime minister. So to me, I think mission accomplished, everyone. And not only that, but not only just not the PM, but not even an MP. So yeah. I'm pretty happy about that. I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that.
To be continued, though.
Yes.
We don't know, right?
Yeah. Well,
we'll see.
He's not an MP now.
Not right now. No.
But actually, Joanne, just to come back to your point about, as a former journalist, where you could never possibly express an opinion, right? Although you did have many opinions in your...
Yeah, I always said to people, if you cared how I voted, I don't know why. I don't think, especially when I was a columnist, I don't think it was a surprise that I leaned kind of, center-ish, left of center. And, I was helping Catherine McKenney's NDP provincial campaign earlier this year, which I think is great because I don't think, some people are very much partisans. They're liberals, are going to be liberals their whole lives. I certainly voted Liberal this time around, but, I don't think that everybody is necessarily a person who just votes one way all the time. And I think that's good because, I think leadership and platforms and individual candidates matter. Right. Okay. So let's talk about the big local stories. So first of all, the numbers as of time of recording, we have, what is it, John?
Yeah, I'm referring to the Globe and Mail site here too. So right now they have the Liberals holding 169 seats. So to remind listeners, it's 172 seats to form a majority. Conservatives have 144 seats. And it sounds like they have 99% of the polls reporting, so we're still waiting for numbers to come in as we're recording the pod.
Some are so close, though.
So close.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, dozens.
Okay, so let's talk about the big local story, which was out, here in Ottawa and in the ward of, or in the riding of Carleton.
And in the country. That is this is the most exciting race.
Yes, where we had a Liberal, Bruce Fanjoy, beat Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. So, John, let's start with you. Were you surprised with those results?
I was surprised, and maybe Joanne will have some...
Who told you 2 weeks ago this might happen?
Joanne might have some internal more intel to back up the win, but I thought for sure Poilievre the voters would come out for him. He's been there for so long. He's obviously a known entity in that part of the city. So I thought they'd come out and put him over the finish line, but obviously that didn't happen. So what happened? Look, and Joanne could talk to this. I'm sure volunteers swarmed that riding.
Yeah, I was there for 3 days.
You were there?
Straight, yeah.
Yep. And he received donations, not just from the riding, from all over Canada, and I
including me,
including from yourself. So there you go. And I remember reading an Ottawa Citizen story where they quoted someone from social media saying they live on Vancouver Island, and it was the first time they voted to any political campaign, and this person decided to put his or her money to Bruce Fanjoy. So there's a lot of things that work. Also, I think, Bruce Fanjoy started this in 2023. So he started at a time when the Liberals weren't yet quite in the dumps, but didn't have a hope in 2024.
Yeah. He was acclaimed. Nobody wants to wants to run for the Liberals in Carleton riding.
Yeah. And so, but that gave him a runway too. And he got his name out there. And I think that prep helped him last night.
Yeah. So Joanne, were you keeping an eye on that race?
Yeah. So, okay, a couple of things I want to say. One, on a logistics point of view, that riding was redrawn. So many of them were redrawn. And so it had a little bit more Stittsville in it. So it had a bit more urban area that tends to vote more Liberal. Before it was more rural, so it was more conservative. A couple of things happened. One, I think a little bit like Paul Dewar. I would never, ever, ever put Paul Dewar and Pierre Poilievre in the same bucket ever. But there was a similarity in that I think when Paul Dewar ran in 2015 against Catherine McKenna, it took him a while to realize Catherine McKenna was getting some momentum, as was the Liberal Party. And when he realized, it kind of was too late to put the resources back in it. And I think what I'm understanding, Carleton, is, like everyone thinks that, Pierre Poilievre, a Conservative vote, is pretty secure in Carleton riding. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that people thought, uh-oh. And I think that was getting too late. Bruce Fanjoy has been going out door knocking since 2023. It is, he's lived there. He is a really amazing person. And I also, not to sound too sappy, but I have to say, he was always meeting people that was, who were saying they didn't really like the behavior of their MP, the way he represented them. And he thought, well, why don't we change that? And so I just want to speak to the power of actually being able to make change. When we say we don't like politics, we don't like the tone of it. You know how you can change that? Get involved. Yeah. So I can barely keep a dry eye talking about it that way. They sent a lot of campaigns. They are run by people from the party who, are working for ministers during the year. So they got a really great campaign team down there. They've been working hard. It was overrun by volunteers. There were so many people. We knocked on 10,000 doors in the last 3 days. Almost too many volunteers. It's I've never volunteered before in my life. You're oh, do you know how to use this app? No.
Well,
okay.
was there a sense of you smell blood, essentially?
Well,
you smell blood and everyone just swarms the zone.
When it started to seem like it was a possibility, and I think I texted you about that, and you're really? I'm yeah, it seems like there is some momentum going on here. Again, with every party, I would like to say in the way we have our national and provincial politics, a candidate cannot probably, I would say, not win a race by themselves. It has to, I think when I've talked to strategists, they say about 5% comes from the actual candidate. The rest has to come from a party and an upsweep in it. But there's just, when people realize that it is possible to unseat Pierre Poilievre, a person who is really not very popular, including there are Conservatives who have said that. It's not just me. Lisa Raitt said people don't like him. There were and people really liked Bruce. We were getting people coming after work from all over the city. Just people who are Liberal supporters. People who came from another province. There was somebody who worked on the campaign from Alberta, came in to help.
Wow.
It was it was an amazing thing, and he was ahead between 15 and 2,000 votes the entire night. I noticed actually CBC did not call it till the very last minute, and because you really don't want to make a mistake on that kind of a riding. But it was an amazing night, and I would say, when those numbers went up, people went crazy.
My big takeaway from that was, you're right that we have seen Bruce Fanjoy out walking the streets for on social media. We've seen this for a couple of years now, and it's really incredible that here's someone that came forward and said, I don't like what I see, and I'm going to do something about it, exactly as you explained, Joanne. And you just sort of watch this momentum build. And then, of course, this massive win got into his sails and took him across the finish line.
And I think a few things have to happen. I don't know if just that happened.
For sure.
The riding redrawing and the Carney wave a bit.
Yeah, but it did remind me of a couple of local elections that I've seen in municipal elections. If I think back to when Toby Nussbaum first got into municipal politics, he spent a year beforehand just getting out there, being seen. Same thing happened with Lane Johnson. Spent a year out there just knocking on doors. And I think there's a takeaway here that the voters see people that are working hard.
Yeah, I would include Tim Tierney in this as well. I remember Rainer Blois bringing him to meet the press at the time before Tim Tierney was seeking office. And so he's getting the name out there, of course, through community associations too. But to your point, Neil, if you hit the ground running early before an election, I think that really helps.
Last word on Bruce Fanjoy. Can we start calling him KINGSLAYER?
Well, I was wondering, what kind of a reward he's going to get.
Yeah.
I think they should have just carried him in on a throne. But anyway, I think he'd like to sleep. I mean, I don't know that he got any sleep actually last night because they were still counting ballots at 4:00.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Ottawa Centre, because that was a race that turned out to be not as close as I suspected it would be. And you'll remember that this was a match-off between Liberal Yasser Naqvi, the incumbent, and NDP Joel Harden. Now, what's interesting about it is that these two went up against each other in the 2018 provincial election, where Joel Harden won.
Or Kathleen Wynne lost.
Well, okay,
that's always the problem.
You're right.
And it's nothing against Joel Harden. He was good representative. This is the problem with party politics. You can't beat a losing leader most of the time.
Well, yeah, and so like let's talk about the numbers for a second. So Yasser Naqvi at the time of recording this pod had 62% of the vote of the rate, which is and Joel Harden had about 20, which is a steamroller effect by Naqvi, and I did not expect that at all. I thought it'd be a lot closer. I live in Ottawa Center, and we live in Ottawa Center. Joanne.
I did not actually.
Oh, you live in Ottawa West Nepean?
No. I live in Ottawa Center, but I did not think it would be.
Oh, I thought it would.
A little bit closer, but I did think that poor Joel, because the NDP was going to be kind of steamrolled.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to do a lot worse than people thought, even though he's very well known.
I thought he would do better than 20%, and I saw just the signs around the riding. I thought were
signs.
I don't look.
Well,
I saw
there's no signs of the signs. We talked about this for 10 years.
I saw some homes with both a Naqvi and a Harden sign on it actually, too, which I thought was pretty funny. But I thought Harden had a little bit more of a win behind his sails because of what he's done at the province. But I think Naqvi rode that, as you call it, the Carney wave and what was going on in international politics with the U.S. And I think you saw the numbers, what happened there in Ottawa Center. The numbers bore out because of those issues. Yeah.
And I think that, unfortunately, well, for Joel, I think he was a victim of the long shadow of Trump, right? I mean, if it'd be interesting.
But also Carney, people in Ottawa Center, and even if it wasn't for Trump, I'm going to argue the people of Ottawa Center like a guy like Mark Carney. You like a guy like Mark
sure.
Carney. Go on.
Well, I did work for him once.
Yeah,
actually.
well, there you go. And so we can talk about that another time. But I also think that if it was Trudeau as the prime minister, then we'd be talking a different thing, right? But even actually as Mark Carney as the prime minister, with Trump, even without Trump, I don't know. And I also would say Joel has lots of support. I don't think he is the kind of widespread belovedness of a Catherine McKenney in that
sure
riding.
Okay. Well, let's move on to other local races. So John, can you just tell us about some of the familiar faces that were returned?
All of them?
Yeah, they're all the names I'm going to say are Liberals right now because that's what happened in the city of Ottawa. So we just talked about Yasser Naqvi. There's Marie-France Lalonde in Orleans, and David McGuinty in Ottawa South, and then Anita Vandenbeld in Ottawa West Nepean, Jenna Sudds out in Canada. Who am I missing? Oh, of course, Mark Carney is the new face, I guess, in Ottawa and in Nepean.
Yes, he'll be showing up in Nepean quite a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. Mona Fortier and Ottawa Vanier. Was Ottawa Vanier Gloucester's the writing's called now too? So all the greatest hits, I guess, are back for another run.
Okay. Any new faces, Joanne, other than Mark Carney?
Yeah. There's a kind of a semi-city county seat over on the East End. It's I have to look at it because I always forget the name of it. It's Prescott Russell Cumberland. It used to be called Glengarry Prescott Russell. And so it's actually has part of Eastern Ottawa in it. Actually has a larger part in it. It has basically Cumberland, which is why they call it that, and part of the United Counties of Prescott Russell. So it's like municipalities like Hawkesbury and Clarence Rockland. It's kind of a bellwether riding. It goes with whoever is forming government. And so since 2015, it has been Liberal. And the new MP, Giovanna Mingarelli, she...
I'm glad that you got to say the name because I had it here. I'm I hope Joanne says this name.
I would have to say I share that name. That is actually my name, Giovanna. So she kept the seat for the Liberals. She grew up in Rockland. She's bilingual. She's been in public life before. She worked for Paul Martin, when she was younger, first out of school. And she's been in political and digital consulting and communications. And so I've actually met her before. She seems great. And I think so that'll be interesting to see it. But it is amazing to look at the map, just a flush of red right across the region. Yeah. It is kind of amazing. In fact, I believe George DeRuse on the provincial is the only conservative elected official we have at the federal and provincial levels in the city, in the whole city. Not, that doesn't include Glengarry or Cumberland Prescott Russell, but yeah.
Okay, let's turn to cabinet and cabinet representation. So we know in the past when we think about what Ottawa area MPs have served in cabinet, we've had Jenna Sudds as the Minister of Families for some time. Quite recently, we had David McGuinty come in as the Minister of Public Safety under both in the late days of the Trudeau government, but also reappointed under Prime Minister Carney. What are our expectations for individuals who might make for potential cabinet roles? John, any thoughts on who we might see in there?
Well, it's hard to think of. I think David McGuinty is probably the strongest candidate to return to cabinet. But you look at the names, Morna Fortier has been in cabinet before too. Yasser Naqvi has served in cabinet positions at the provincial level, and he'd probably be on the mind of the Prime Minister in terms of a cabinet spot. But, the Prime Minister is going to have to think about cabinet positions all across the country. So how many MPs can we send to cabinet? Maybe just one. And that one probably, if I had to guess, would be David McGuinty.
Yeah, I would say that too. And, Mark Carney has gone with a much, much smaller cabinet than Trudeau did. I don't see that changing. There's going to be people like Gregor Robertson and Evan Solomon, the big stars, probably someone from Alberta, somebody from Saskatchewan. And so I don't see... we'll be lucky to get two back. I do think, though, that Bruce Fanjoy will get...
KINGSLAYER.
Yes, the KINGSLAYER. That's good. He was called that this morning on the radio. He's looked very uncomfortable with that title. But I think, I don't think he would get a cabinet position, but I could see him being made like a parliamentary secretary, for example.
Okay. And of course, let's not forget that
also the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister,
yeah. So that's not unhelpful.
No,
that
when you want something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of cabinet spots, you have the Prime Minister... And let's assume for a second, David McGuinty. I don't think anyone else would be from Ottawa be put on cabinet.
Yeah, I think that's right. Actually, it was funny because during the campaign, someone asked if he would, put an MP from Alberta. Aren't you going to get an MP from Alberta on your cabinet? He's like, well, I'm from Alberta. And I'm like,
we'll talk about
that
this
doesn't really count.
Yeah. I just want to ask about Prime Minister Carney being, do we consider him from Ottawa? Do we think that's going to, and I got to assume that any cabinet minister from Ottawa is it's impossible not to think about the city in some sort of preferential way, not deliberately, but do you think there will be a benefit for Ottawa?
First, on the first question, you can get the second part if you don't mind. Like, I do consider him from Ottawa, unless you can only run in a city if you've lived there your whole life, which none of us that excludes all of us here at this table. Actually, I don't know where you're from. That's a lie.
I was not born here.
Okay, well, there you go. So I'm Toronto implant myself, but he spent a lot of his time here. He's deputy finance minister. Yeah. He was the Bank of Canada governor. When he went to be the Bank of England governor, he's kept his house because his family said, no, we're moving back here. Our kids grew up here. This is their home. He's been back here since 2020. I mean, I don't know if you're not from Ottawa from that, with that, who is from Ottawa? Now, is he from Nepean? Like, that is interesting. Like, it's weird. Like, is he ever going to vote for Nepean? Like, he did not vote for himself yesterday. Yeah. Because he does not live there. So that's kind of weird. And does that matter? I don't know. I have to say Diana Fox Kearney did some yeoman service. Like, she went door to door.
She represented him pretty much
really
in the riding,
well.
Right?
Yeah. I did a sit down with Charlie Senek. I think they're BFFs now. I don't know. But so that'll be an interesting dynamic for the riding. But I actually have to say, I don't think you can't say he's not an Ottawa person.
Yeah. And I remember back to when him and Mayor Mark Sutcliffe had breakfast the day after he won the leadership. And I thought that was kind of indicative of what that relationship could be like.
That he's interested in the city.
Yeah. And I think so is he an Ottawan? I don't know what makes someone an Ottawan. But the fact that he was talking about, he was born in the Northwest Territories and he grew up in Alberta. But I, like Joanne, I've always seen him as kind of like an Ottawa bureaucrat in a way. That's how because that's my frame of reference with specifically the Bank of Canada. So I think by living here, you learn about the local issues through osmosis. So he would be familiar with the city's transit issues and LRT. Yeah. I would think he knows about the National Capital Commission's project at LeBreton Flats.
He actually was pretty interested in the mayoral race because he actually endorsed Catherine McGuinty.
Yeah, he was involved in the mayoral race. It was quite
interesting.
You know probably about the Ottawa Senators wanting to come down to LeBreton Flats. So I think just by the virtue of living here, he would know about what's going on, and the fact that it sounds like Mayor Mark Sutcliffe might have his ear, that's important too.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay, John, you mentioned bureaucrats, and one of the issues that one of the issues that a lot of people in the city have been paying attention to are what will this election mean for potential public service cuts? Okay, because both of the
Caps, not cuts, Neil.
What does
Well-
that mean? What does that
I don't
mean?
know.
Yeah, what does that
that's
mean?
actually, I mean, that's a very good point, right? Because we've seen these exercises in the past. There have been a couple of them, and we won't go into the details of them now, but there's no doubt that there was a narrative that the public service needed to be either kept at the level it's at, or cut, or something needed to be done to bring spending under control. So what do we know about the Prime Minister's ambitions on capping the public service?
Well, cap, that's the word that the Prime Minister likes to use, and we don't know what that means. He's talking about a review of the public service.
It means not grow, that's for sure. But does
Capped
it mean
at what?
Like, I think
Just
that,
like
like what
at
it is now.
today's levels?
I think so.
Or are we going to grow it? Like, he's talked about a review of the public service, number one, right? He talked about a review of the public service. He's talked about efficiencies in the billions, many billions, whatever that
AI.
means. Using AI, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And so, like, both the leading parties have talked about looking at the public service. I don't know what that's going to mean under Mark Carney. I have no idea. There's going to be a review. A review can happen. It can sit on a shelf, and the party keeps on governing based on what's going on, other priorities. So I'd say to be determined.
Well, I actually have to say there are some numbers put around this. Whether they are realistic, I do not know. But so one of the things Mark Carney spoke about during the campaign was that the operating part of the budget was growing at 9% a year. He wants that down to 2% a year. That is dramatic change, and is looking for, operational balance, of like in 3 to 4 years, or no, around 4 years from now. So that is a major change. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking at that. We will see if that is doable, if it's doable at all, and if it's doable in a minority government.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That minority question is a big one. I mean, I think that, a 2% growth is essentially, let's call it inflation, right? So it's saying level of government will stay the same other than inflation. But then I get,
Somehow be more efficient and more streamlined. And
so
I think of words like Phoenix when you think about, bringing all the government services together. And I have to say that IFSD, when our friends over at the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, when they reviewed the platforms, that is one of the things they point out. They like the Liberal platform the best, but they'd say these undefined efficiencies. And I've never known one platform ever to like in every election I've ever covered that did not have some of those. I don't know.
Efficiencies?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great word, like optimization, efficiencies. I mean, people all, when we are skeptics around the table, and I always say it's a cut when you talk about efficiency, and that's what they are. You're trying to roll money back from the resources that you have. So, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen. But this being a public service town, that's probably the biggest issue. That's probably the biggest issue in the city.
Right. And I think it's fair to say that with a minority government, the chances are that any public sector reform will be fairly limited. And I think there'll be some people, certainly of my vintage, who will be probably disappointed to hear that it will not include buyouts.
Buyouts.
I don't think that is happening.
I think that's off the table with the size of expected cuts. Okay, let's turn to the question of housing. And now the Liberals introduced quite a comprehensive housing plan. It included no GST on homes under $1 million for first-time home buyers. It included standing up a new public builder, Build Canada Homes, I think focused on affordable homes and also on really getting the modular industry going. Mm-hmm. And number 3,
Mark Carney loves mass timber. That I can tell you from inside scoop.
That's
he
all
really,
they talk
really
about
likes
is mass timber inside the park.
Utilizing softwood lumber from BC and Quebec.
All right. Now, there's also talk about development charges. Those would be cut in half somehow or other. Now,
but
of course,
also, I think, given that, unlike the Conservative platform, I think making the city whole on those. Right.
Yes. Although
I don't know how it works either.
Yeah, we don't know how it works. And it does create a bit of a perverse incentive, right? Because as a city, seeing this coming, you should say, well, let's keep ramping up development charges so that we get half of them back, right?
Go back, yeah. So what's going to happen locally? All things like equal, okay, on that. So what does it mean for the City of Ottawa? I think the federal land is where the difference maker is in the city.
Yeah.
What kind of federal land can we unlock to make these developments happen? And so I'm curious to see. I don't know if the Prime Minister's plan talked about this in the platform, but what land can we make available? And we have a lot of federal land, obviously, in the city. And what can we make it available for housing projects?
Yeah, I mean, they're putting a lot. They're promised a lot of money, $10 billion in low cost financing for homes that support middle and low income Canadians. I don't know what that means exactly, but also there is money for actually deeply affordable housing, and also I think what we're going to see is a lot of rentals because they're going to increase the and bring back a plan that gives really great financing to developers who will build purpose rental
purpose-built rentals.
And and that's something we had in the 70s, and there was a lot of buildings, rentals built, and then it stopped, right? Because of course the builders don't make their money back as quickly when they're building rentals, and we've seen that. Claridge built a ton here, and I can see them leaning into this money.
And we don't. I feel like we don't really talk about the rental market a lot.
Yeah.
It's all about how do we allow people to buy homes. But I think one of the things that hasn't really been discussed in the housing conversation is the rental market. And
also how we can actually build rentals that are not just for a single person, right? This is what's really missing.
Yeah.
How do we incentivize that? Because they're so expensive to build them. You build a 3-bedroom rental apartment, it's going to be $4,500 and nobody wants that. So how do you do that? So we'll see. I mean, it is ambitious and we'll see how that works out.
Okay. I want to turn to the relationship between the city and the federal government. And both the mayor of Ottawa and the mayor of Gatineau came out before the election, about a month or so before, with a list of priorities for the two cities. So everything from revitalizing downtowns, fair payment of our Pilts, our good friend Pilts.
oh gosh,
take
it away from them.
We cannot go an episode without saying Pilts. Support for public sector worker transition, public transit funding, affordable housing and homelessness, strengthening regional governance, i.e. asking for a voting seat on the NCC, I think, for both the cities.
I don't think anyone cares about that.
Yeah, infrastructure. And so those are some of the priorities that the mayor's put forward.
Sure.
Do we, is the federal government paying attention to this?
Okay, well, no way they're paying attention to regional representation on the NCC board. Also, both the mayors are already on that. So,
well, they don't have the votes, of course.
I know, but yeah, and that'll be an interesting also that relationship because Toby Nussbaum, who is the CEO, is I think an associate, let's say, of Mark Carney. I know that his term was extended, but if it was going to be a conservative government, how is that relationship going to go? I don't think it was going to stay there if it was going to be a problem. I don't think it's going to be a problem now. So it'll be interesting to see how those issues get moved along. The development of LeBreton, as John said earlier, the Sens wanting to come down to LeBreton Flats.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any new money for transit operations here,
right,
or even infrastructure. Frankly, they're not. It's not in the platform. I don't. The Trudeau era one where I can't remember.
Yeah, the public transit fund.
The public transit fund.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It has not been cut. It has been preserved.
Yeah.
But I don't see any new money for that. The Pilts. I think there is some validity to Mayor Mark Sutcliffe's view that some of the properties. Federal properties are paying ridiculous taxes. And I remember a story by Elise Skura saying, for example, the NCC wants to say that LeBreton Flats is a park. Does it seem like a park to you, like a neighborhood park? So really, should they pay taxes based on as if it were a park, that kind of thing? So I think there's a little bit of maneuvering room there. And again, from the fact they even had this breakfast makes me think that Mark Carney is open to that. What do you think?
Well, revitalizing downtown, I mean, that's one of the top issues for the mayors. And I'm wondering what is the federal government going to do to help?
I think the conversions, right?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think housing is the key. I think funding, if there's federal buildings downtown, one of the issues that's always plagued the city of Ottawa's downtown is not having enough people living down there.
Exactly.
So you get more people living down there. Hopefully it'll bring money into the core, more businesses, et cetera. So that's one way I think the feds could help.
And there
the
is some
downtown
money,
situation.
like they specifically say in the platform, to incentivize conversions, right? And so you have like Esplanade Laurier, for example.
Yeah, but that's that's a really strange situation because we got the public service that a couple of years ago was downsizing its office space and is now bringing everyone back to work, and we're having these office problems. And so how much? There's a few properties that have been identified that
maybe they won't be expanding as much anymore. I don't know. Yeah, it's actually true. And this is, I think, the flux of not knowing what is going to happen has stopped people from actually making any change. But I actually have to say I'm pretty sick of hearing about vague, like how we're going to, revitalize downtown. I was at a summit for the city last week, and I have to say, no offense to the people who are running it, but we just keep talking in generalities about things, and I'd like to hear some specifics of what's going to happen.
Okay, well, on that note, let's flip that around. So we heard what the mayors were asking of the federal government. The federal government has been asking certain things of those two cities also. Now, not quite as openly and as directly as a joint letter, but if you remember in the dying days of the Trudeau government, there were a couple of items that came up through, I think it was the fall economic statement, where money was put, and this was seen as for the region, seen as an evident priority of the federal government. So we had, for instance, money to study a new bridge crossing at Kettle Island in the East End. We had money to study the Gatineau tramway on the Ontario side. So all the preparatory work has been done on the Quebec side. The Quebec government has put forward money for a tram to go from Aylmer through downtown Gatineau into Ottawa onto Wellington Street, right? And a third priority for the federal government, in addition to the bridge and the tramway, is Wellington Street itself. We've talked about that before, and that would mean having to close it both for security reasons, but also to accommodate this new tramway. So I think if I were to say what are the federal government's priorities for the city of Ottawa, I would say those three are where they're putting their money. And so I'd be curious to think if we'll see any sort of advance on those three topics.
Well, it'll be interesting what the budget says, because this is despite people wanting to paint it as a Trudeau era government, and there are certainly some overlaps with that, but this prime minister is he talks about infrastructure all the time. And so you have Stephen McKinnon from the Gatineau side back on in government, probably on cabinet. He's a big supporter of the bridge. So I can see the bridge getting some momentum there. Politically, always tricky, that one. But I mean, the truck traffic on King Edward is not going away, and we're not going to get rid of it, and we're not going to move it without a bridge. So I can see that getting pushed forward. Maybe Wellington, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know. This government has a huge agenda. It's very national in scope. And so who knows? Now, as John said, we're probably only going to have one minister on locally. So perhaps the other MPs have work to, they have maybe a role in shaping the capital. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think like the great thing about being Ottawa is that you're the nation's capital, but that can be one of your Achilles heel too, because if you spend too much money in the capital of Canada, it really raises the ire of the rest of Canada. So if you're going to spend billions of dollars on a bridge to help people in the capital, what does that mean for the other two priorities that you talked about, Neil? Now, Wellington Street's really interesting. We've talked about it on the pod before. It seems like there's an interest in general to make that into a bit of a pedestrian space, whether it be for pedestrians or for security of the precinct. So I wouldn't be surprised if I'd be surprised if that just fell off the table. Now the tram,
if it did fall off the table, or if it,
I would be surprised if it fell off the table. Yeah. But I guess that goes hand in glove in a way with tram, that conversation. But to Joanne's point, it's like they've got a bigger fish to fry right now than a tram in the nation's capital. So I don't know where that sits in the priorities.
And it's hard because on the other side, you also have all of the proponents for that. Greg Fergus, Toby Nussbaum, back in. Mark Carney seems very much interested in making Ottawa a capital from what he's seen. So and if he gives Mark Sutcliffe some money for the Pilts, then maybe take over Wellington. Like what is that deal? I think we're going to come to a bigger deal on Wellington and on Pilts soon, and so maybe that's part of it. Could be exciting times.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think those issues are actually all interconnected. So as you explained, there'll be some sort of big deal, but the bridge is part of it too. The bridge in the East End, because that tramway from Gatineau to Ottawa would use the
Alexandra Bridge?
no,
Portage.
The
Portage.
Bridge.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. But where's it going on the
And-
other end, though?
Well,
Yeah.
okay, one sec.
Okay.
So it would take the Portage Bridge, and it would require 2 lanes of the Portage Bridge, and so the bridge out in the east end, the new one, the proposed new one, would be to maintain the lane space. So there is a connection in between these three
Oh, that's
three
interesting. Yeah, I hadn't
initiatives.
thought of that, actually.
Yeah. And you know what,
And also, build, baby, build.
build baby
So,
build.
I will not be sorry
Yeah.
to never hear that again.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about LRT in that. I think those were 3 good priorities,
Yeah.
but we haven't talked about LRT expansion in the city.
You
of
heard
Ottawa
nothing
either.
about LRT expansion, right?
Well,
I mean, LRT
right.
3 is so far away.
I think so,
It's so
too.
far away.
Yeah, and it's more of a provincial issue anyways, right?
No, are you kidding? Like the city's like a province and feds, so you have to pay for it.
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah, but they hope
Yeah.
that they want. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's our thought on the impacts of the federal election for the city of Ottawa.
I mean, by the time we're done this podcast, maybe they're having a majority by now.
I don't know.
Who
I
knows?
keep refreshing just in case we have breaking news on the pod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally this morning it was 167, and then I was surprised to hear 169 from John.
yeah,
all
but
right.
it's certainly going to be an interesting times ahead for the city, and on balance, I think it's fair to say that it's from the perspective of the city of Ottawa, it's good news, the way that we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Speaking of moving forward, next week, now there are a few issues that we've been trying to get at, which we haven't been able to, that hopefully we'll have a chance to revisit next week. So, for instance, the revenue from red light cameras.
What a schmozzle that audit is. I was listening to the meeting of it this morning, and you're like, this is so confusing. And it's going to go back to a theme you brought up earlier, and that is, why can city reports not be written so normal people can read them? So, yeah, it was really interesting. So, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward
So
to
the
talking.
audit fund not going to road safety programs, all the money like
Yeah.
it should be.
Except it
going
kind
to,
of
right?
is. So that's the weird thing.
To be hashed
Well,
out.
When we figure
by
it out,
us.
we will need a week to
we
figure
will
that
dig
out.
into this. And then, John, I mean, the new Ways to Bus has just started a couple of days ago, and I guess we'll get a better sense of whether that's working. Where some of the and I think that in all fairness to OC Transport, they have said we're watching it, we're monitoring it, and we'll make adjustments as required.
Yeah, it's early days.
Yeah.
Right? Really early days. So hopefully in a week we'll be able to be in a better position to
My
find out
neighborhood
how
bus
things are going.
changed as well.
It did.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
and
I'm
we
not
have
taking it yet.
and
so.
we have that free weekend of that weekend of free transit
Right,
coming up.
up.
What? I missed this entire thing in the bubble of
Yeah.
the war room. What? When are we getting a free weekend of
I
transit?
believe it's this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Coming up?
it's first weekend of May, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
Why?
ride the rails, ride the bus around
Why is that?
to promote the system.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
don't
going
know.
to say no to free transit.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if the Sens are going to be, we're talking about the Sens and whether they're going to have a playoff game during a free transit night to be determined after tonight and beyond. But yeah, so ride the rails and ride the bus around the city,
Yeah.
the great city of
Okay,
Ottawa.
great.
Well, I have to be honest. I plan on taking the train out to the airport.
Because you haven't done it yet?
I have. Well,
Yeah,
you know
I
what?
did it when
I've
I-
actually been out to the airport a couple of times, and both times I wanted to take the train out, but I just couldn't make it work for I was just too rushed. But I'm going to maybe even pack a bag and see what
I
the
have done
experience
that
is
exact
like.
Do
thing.
it.
It's very nice.
Have you?
Yeah, it's a nice ride. And actually, I have a colleague at Strategy Corp who early on, he's like, I bet I took the train before you guys did because he flew in and took the train. So, it's a couple of changes. So,
Yeah.
but the actual ride on the Trillium line's pretty nice.
Okay.
Those trains are nice.
Okay. That is it for this week. So, Henry, if you can just move us over here. Thank you. There we go. As always, if you have any comments, please let us know what you think. You can leave those on Substack. You can leave them on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, wherever you find us. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I want to thank our panelists, John, Joanne. It's great to have you back.
Great to be back.
And I'd like to thank our producer, Henry Allen.
Henry.
Thank you, Henry.
And we will look forward to reconnecting with you all next week. Thank you.